In the summer of 480 BCE, history stood at the edge of a narrow pass, the gateway to Greece known as Thermopylae. Here, two vastly unequal forces would collide, creating one of the most iconic military standoffs ever recorded. Immortalized by poets, dramatists, and modern films, the Battle of Thermopylae is commonly remembered for the bravery of 300 Spartans who stood against a sea of Persian soldiers. But when we peel back the layers of myth and legend, we discover a battle far richer in complexity and heroism. A tale not just of Sparta, but of a coalition of Greek warriors willing to sacrifice everything to defend their homeland. Let's set the stage. On one side, the Persian Empire, led by the ambitious King Xerxes. Persia was vast, powerful, and resourced to an almost mythical degree. Xerxes brought an army that ancient historians claimed numbered in the hundreds of thousands, though modern estimates suggest it was closer to 100,000 to 150,000 soldiers. This was no ordinary campaign. Xerxes sought to subjugate the Greek city-states, known for their fierce independence and fractious alliances, and add them to the sprawling Persian Empire. On the other side stood a coalition of Greek city-states led by Sparta, the warrior society renowned for its discipline and martial excellence. This coalition knew the odds. They weren't just steep, they were almost unimaginable. The Persians had overwhelming numbers and the Greek city-states were disunited, often quarreling among themselves. And yet for once, many of these rival cities came together, galvanized by the threat to their freedom. Together they chose to make their stand at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a natural bottleneck where Persia's numerical advantage could be neutralized. Everyone remembers the Spartans, the famed 300 led by King Leonidas, who have been etched into memory as paragons of bravery and sacrifice. But this narrative tells only part of the story. The Spartan contingent was joined by warriors from other Greek city-states. In total, historians estimate that around 7,000 Greeks first arrived at Thermopylae, including soldiers from places like Corinth, Thebes, and Phocis. And among them were the Thespians, a lesser-known but no less heroic group whose contributions to the battle arguably rivaled that of the Spartans themselves. The Thespians came from the city of Thespiae in central Greece. Unlike Sparta, Thespiae wasn't a militarized society, but its citizens rallied behind the call for collective resistance, sending around 700 men to Thermopylae. Why did they fight? Thespiae was close enough to suffer immediate consequences if the Persians broke through. But their actions also highlighted a deeper truth about the battle itself. It wasn't just about Spartan courage. It was a shared fight for the liberty and survival of all Greek city-states. For 2 days, the Greeks held their ground, repelling wave after wave of Persian attacks. Thermopylae was the perfect place for their defense. The narrow pass prevented the Persians from utilizing their numerical superiority, forcing them to attack in tight formations that played into the Greeks' strengths: discipline, superior training, and heavily armored hoplites. The Greek phalanx, a disciplined line of warriors armed with spears and shields, proved fearsome, even against the might of Persia's renowned immortals, Xerxes' elite guard. The strategy was simple but effective. Hold the pass, protect the Greek heartland, and buy time for allied city-states to organize their navies and armies. By day 2, Xerxes was reportedly furious. His army was suffering unexpected losses, and the Greeks refused to yield. But Thermopylae wasn't destined to hold forever. The Greeks stood united, their resolve unbroken despite the looming threat. Betrayal sealed the Greeks' fate. A local Greek named Ephialtes revealed a secret path to the Persians, one that led through the mountains and behind the Greek position. With this knowledge, Xerxes dispatched troops to encircle the defenders. When Leonidas learned of the betrayal, he understood the implications immediately. The pass would fall, and the Persian tide could no longer be stemmed. Faced with inevitable destruction, Leonidas made a fateful decision. He ordered the bulk of the Greek forces to retreat, preserving their lives for future battles. But he and a small contingent stayed behind to hold the line and delay the Persians for as long as humanly possible. Around 700 Thespians, led by their commander Demophilus, chose to stay and fight to the death alongside Leonidas and his men. Unlike the Spartans, who had been raised under a warrior code that glorified such sacrifices, the Thespians were civilians who volunteered for certain death. They fought not for honor bound by tradition, but for the love of their city and their homeland. What followed was a final stand that would echo through the centuries. Surrounded and vastly outnumbered, the remaining Greek warriors fought with ferocious intensity. Herodotus, the ancient historian, describes the scene in vivid detail, how the Greeks battled with their spears until they broke, then fought with swords until those too shattered, and finally resorted to their bare hands and teeth. They fought as long as they could before being overwhelmed by the Persian forces. The Spartans and Thespians were annihilated, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. News of their extraordinary resistance spread like wildfire across Greece. Their bravery bought time for the Greeks to rally their naval forces. At the Battle of Salamis later that year, the Greek navy delivered a decisive blow to Xerxes' fleet, turning the tide of the war and eventually driving the Persians out of Greece. Thermopylae's legacy endures, but it's often simplified into a tale of Spartan heroism alone. This does a disservice to the broader coalition that stood at the pass. Beyond the Spartans were diverse groups of Greeks who banded together despite their differences, united by a common goal: to protect their freedom at all costs. The Thespians, in particular, deserve recognition as equal partners in sacrifice, demonstrating that courage is not confined to martial tradition, but flows from the human spirit when called upon. When we remember Thermopylae, it's tempting to focus on the Spartans, their steely discipline, their warrior ethos, their unflinching resolve. But the true story is so much larger. It's about a collective effort, a shared stand against overwhelming odds. It's about Thespians who chose to walk into the fire alongside the Spartans, knowing they would never walk back out. It's about how a small band of determined people can defy an empire and inspire generations to come. Today, the words of a simple epitaph carved upon a memorial at Thermopylae still resonate. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie." But perhaps we should expand that memory to include all who fought. Not just the Spartans, but all the Greeks who stood together in defense of their land, their freedom, and their way of life. Thermopylae was more than 300 Spartans. It was a testament to shared sacrifice, a reminder of what people can achieve when united by a purpose greater than themselves. Today, the words of a simple epitaph carved upon a memorial at Thermopylae still resonate. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." But perhaps we should expand that memory to include all who fought. Not just the Spartans, but all the Greeks who stood together in defense of their land, their freedom, and their way of life. Thermopylae was more than 300 Spartans. It was a testament to shared sacrifice, a reminder of what people can achieve when united by a purpose greater than themselves. The Thespians, in particular, deserve recognition as equal partners in sacrifice, demonstrating that courage is not confined to martial tradition, but flows from the human spirit when called upon. When we remember Thermopylae, it's tempting to focus on the Spartans, their steely discipline, their warrior ethos, their unflinching resolve. But the true story is so much larger. It's about a collective effort, a shared stand against overwhelming odds. It's about Thespians who chose to walk into the fire alongside the Spartans, knowing they would never walk back out. It's about how a small band of determined people can defy an empire and inspire generations to come.